welcome. It's the ProSynth Network live show, episode 177, and it's a very special one too. Welcome to you all. I hope you're all well. I hope you've had a great week since we last met, and that you've all been enjoying the good weather. I hope you're having good weather, unless you're down under. It's still winter there, I think. But even then, an Australian winter, they're sort of 20 plus degrees Celsius, so it's not awful, really, is it? But anyway, welcome, and we've got a fantastic show lined up for you today. We've got a really special guest, but before we get there, let's just do the regular housekeeping, get the boring stuff out of the way quickly. Please remember, if you can, like, comment, subscribe and share, because it's how we get our content out there to as many people as possible. So if you wouldn't mind, if you haven't already, give the video a thumbs up. If you want to leave comments during the show, you can do so using the chat features. So we are broadcasting live now on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter and Facebook, and you can comment on all of those. We will see all of your comments, although unfortunately at the moment we're not able to cross-pollinate those comments between platforms, so you'll only ever see the comments on the platform that you're viewing on, but we're very lucky. We get to see all of them. So don't be shy, and if you have any questions or comments for us or our guest today, then stick a big capital Q in front of it so we can just pick it out and stick it into the slot ready to be posed to our guest or ourselves. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button, ring the bell to make sure you get notifications, and share the links around. That would be fantastic. If you want to find us on social media, we are all over that. Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And, oh yes, and of course, I've missed this because it's not called Twitter anymore, is it? It's X. Yeah. Anyway, we're on that for the time being anyway. If you have any questions, stick a big capital Q in front of that. And if you want to make a donation to the channel, you don't have to. This show is completely free. There's no Patreon or anything like that. But if you want to donate to the show, then you can do so either through our PayPal donation link, which is there on the screen, but also there's a clickable link down below in the comments. Or you can use the good old-fashioned super chat and super stickers that YouTube provide during the show, or if you're watching on catch-up, and hi to you, thanks for coming back, click the thanks button underneath and it does the same sort of thing. So we truly appreciate all your donations. It helps keep us on the air and hopefully do some pretty cool things in the coming year or so. Anyway, right, housekeeping out of the way. That's that. Welcome to everyone that's in the chat. First of all, let's give a big welcome to Stephen Smith, who has donated his usual $50 Australian. Yay. Thank you ever so much indeed for that. I think that deserves a big round of applause. There we go. Thank you, sir. As always, it's you can almost set your watch by Stephen, and that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. Also, I just want to say thank you to three very special people in the chat. They are Andrew Brooks, Andy Synth Addict, and of course Ben from Musings. Those three guys are our chat moderators. They have the easiest job in the world because you guys are all so well behaved. So thank you for that. And they also post the links to anything that we talk about. So this one's going to be different because there's not a huge amount of news this week, but we've decided to forego all the kind of news topics that we normally cover on the show because we've got a really special guest and we want to spend as much time with him as possible. So no real news discussion today. But there are plenty of other channels. You've got Sonic State, you've got Ramsey tomorrow, you've probably got Jamie on Sunday. There's loads of other places you can get your synthesizing news this week. But bit of a special one this week. Anyway, if you want to ask a question, I've said this, stick a big capital Q. We've got them coming in already. That's really fantastic. Thank you ever so much for that. So we'll be throwing those around the room very shortly. Let me just get rid of that off of screen. And let's first of all go up north. The man is basically responsible for the whole process, his idea, and he takes all the blame, basically. Hello, Ben.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great, yeah, I'm great. I've got a couple of internet problems again, as usual. I really need to get it sorted out at this house, but I'm pretty good.
Good, excellent. I thought you were gigging tonight for some reason. I don't know why, but was it called off?
No, I think I'm going to miss. It might be the next two shows because I've got gigs for the next two shows. But tonight, I'm here.
Good, excellent stuff.
In body, anyway.
You've just reminded me with that really cool polo shirt that you've got on there that Viper Graphics are back, and they're doing our merch again. So we will get the links back up. But yeah, vipergraphics.co.uk doing all the ProSynth Network merch, and they're back on the ball. So if you want to order some of those things, then yeah, vipergraphics.co.uk. For some reason, the the banner's gone. I'm going to have to knock one of those up mid-show. But yeah, good to see you, mate. All well in your world? Apart from being a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, everything's
and frozen. There he is.
Yeah,
he's back again.
Sorry about that. I might nip off at some point and try and reboot the router. We'll see how things go. But
all right then.
Yeah, I don't want it to affect things too much. This
Nah.
personal hotspot I'm having to use.
It's your neighbour's Wi-Fi. That's what it is, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Cool. So welcome, sir. Kent is a little bit on the drag, everyone. So don't worry, he will be with us shortly. But before we go to our guest, let's bring in Mr. Longhurst. How are you, sir? And he's got a T-shirt at last. Yay!
I'm
Yay for
good.
branded goods.
I'm great, and I'm deeply touched that you thought to introduce me as a special guest. I think it's marvelous. But I think couldn't you find someone else, someone better looking, more
Nobody's
musical?
stupid enough.
No one.
No,
No
couldn't
one
find
at
anyone.
all?
Honestly, couldn't find
Oh
anyone.
my goodness! Oh my
No,
goodness!
sorry. Anyway, how are you? So have you been busy this week?
Yeah, more madness. Like yourself, I'm going through the stress with passports. I've sent one off to be renewed. I've got Adobe have asked me to attend an event in Amsterdam on
Oh yes.
13th, 14th, 15th of September, and I haven't got a passport back, so I'm chasing them
my
and getting
word.
very stressed doing that thing, but we'll get there. But otherwise, all good. The mill's moving forward. We're getting, buying the mill and all that kind of stuff, and occasionally whittling is good. It's all good.
Nice one. Good stuff. Good to see you as always. Now then, I think because Kent's going to be joining us a little bit later, we need to get to our very, very special guest. How do I introduce this gentleman? I'm going to try and do this as quickly and succinctly as possible. It's a name that you might not have been hugely familiar with leading up to, so maybe say the last couple of years. But this gentleman has been over some of the most amazing records, worked with some of the most amazing artists, and has composed music for some really cool films as well. And he's a master of everything he touches. And most recently, and this is where a lot of you may have first kind of picked up the name, has started a couple of YouTube channels. The first one was called Stories in the Room, and it was all about how Thriller was made and focusing in particular on the synthesizer elements and the drum machines and the programming and the performance. And there's some amazing stuff. Our friend Steve Porcaro pops up every now and again in the series. Greg Fillinganes is on there. And there's just a whole bunch of musicians and engineers that were involved in the Thriller album. It's fascinating stuff. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later also. But his own YouTube channel has just exploded because he's talking to some amazing people, showing some amazing gear. Just this week, we were treated to a 2-hour episode of a tour around Rob Rosen's workshops in California. And Rob is basically the American version of Kent Spong. I'm sure neither of those gentlemen would mind me saying that. They are both synth tech legends, and Rob's studio and the facility is fantastic. And I believe actually we're running against Anthony's video right now because there's a snippet he's taken out from the CS80 dive that they did into this amazing machine. Of course, we have a big CS80 fan in our own Kent Spong, who has worked closely with Rob on those synths. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, can I introduce to you Mr. Anthony Marinelli?
Yay!
Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Rob.
No. Thank you for coming on and for being so enthusiastic about being here and talking to us all. And that your background looks quite familiar, because if you've watched any of the Stories in the Room videos, those synthesizers feature quite prominently, particularly the 2600 that's right there, and the Mini Moog and the Korg MSs. There's so cool gear there. Look at that. The Jupiter and the Prophet. It's all there.
Oh,
It's
that's
all,
a combo there, isn't it?
it's
Oh, I
just,
get it. Yeah,
it's like-
circle.
you have the best toys.
There's other stuff.
Look
Well,
at that.
you know,
It's amazing.
You did mention this earlier. It's taken a long time to sort of. I didn't just get them all like on Christmas morning or something. when like 50 years of just needing them for things, and then
Yeah.
going through the evolution of going from, like getting before there was memory, and then using them like on sessions. And my ARP 2600, like you can see all these sort of extra little buttons up here. And
Oh yeah.
because before memory, I had to do like movie sessions as just a player out there, so I
Uh-huh.
could get octave switching. So because like a Mini Moog, you could switch on octaves, but I didn't have the ability to make as more intricate level of sound creation.
Yeah.
So I could use the 2600 and get octave switching, and then these are preset voltages down and up. These are my like fine-tuned calibration knobs. I have like extra long ADSR envelope, lengths, a lot of little things, extra mults. But like what my point is, in the beginning, I just went through the evolution, and then suddenly I'd get a synth that could have memory,
Yeah.
and that was like, and then polyphony. So
Yeah.
it was like a gathering for me of going through all the steps, and then more, greater technology, ability to do things with more voices, and then effects and all that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it's been great for me to just sort of watch it grow, and then I can appreciate it in a different way. Now you have just an insane amount of choice. And the Eurorack stuff is cool too. Like I use that with my
There you
ARP
go.
2600, and I love it because it has controllability that the analog stuff doesn't have. I love the sound, like tone generators on the older things, but like these guys can manipulate the sound in the coolest, ways that these designers are conceptualizing now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if I'm going off topic, but
No,
I'm in-
you're
I-
completely
On
on topic. Whereabouts do we? Because you're based in California, right?
yes.
Is that LA area sort of thing? Or?
LA area. I
Yeah.
was born in the San Fernando Valley. I'm Full
Nice.
Valley anyway. But I grew up here, so the industry was just part of growing up.
Of course, yeah. Actually, that was going to be my first question. Is like, I was reading up about you. Your father was in the industry, and that's kind of how you were introduced to it. Is that how you got into electronic music and synthesizers, or was that just kind of like a basic musical foundation, and then you found your own path?
Well, my father wasn't a musician, and he wasn't really in the music business, but he was a stagehand, and he was the title was Master of Properties, which means
yes.
you're in charge of the sets as they come on stage. So he worked at the Music Center, which had 3 theaters: the Dorothy Chandler, the Amundsen, and the Mark Taper Theater, and that was the center of that type of culture in Los Angeles, which we didn't have a lot of. We didn't have a lot of museums and things like that. So this is where you'd go to see 4 musicals a year, the LA Philharmonic, maybe some opera, but it was like they didn't really have an opera proscenium, that they would just throw the opera into this multi-purpose room. And the Oscars were there every year.
Wow.
And so that's what and then they had like a small experimental stage, the Mark Taper Theater in the Round, and then like the Amundsen could handle like a show that would just come in and just be there all the time, like Phantom of the Opera or something that would just have to stay in one place because it's so elaborate to set up. And then the Dorothy Chandler would just they would be able to strike one thing, the symphony one day, and then, a musical the next day, and then the Oscars. So he was there and he worked that kind of a schedule. And what happened for me was to see him, because it was a busy schedule. They had shows every day except Monday, Sunday matinees. So he worked every night. He'd come home for dinner. But to see him and hang out, I would just go there and go into the light booth or be on the side of the stage. And he was like an Italian guy that really liked food. And he had a kitchen. He had his own kitchen on the stage. So he gained the favor of a lot of celebrities that liked it. And I fortunately got to eat with them. And I met the likes of Vladimir Horowitz, the pianist, and Arthur Rubinstein,
Oh wow.
Wow.
pianist, Katharine Hepburn, Charlie Chaplin when he came for the Oscars. I mean, just Luciano Pavarotti. I can just go on and on. Angela Lansbury, you know, from the theater. Bernadette Peters. They were all like really good friends with him. Zubin Mehta, the conductors. So, you know, they would encourage me musically, and I just wanted to quit piano lessons until I reached on Bach. And that was like, okay, what is that? Maybe I could play that thing. And, you know, I figured out a way to get one. I ended up buying a used one from Jerry Goldsmith that he had just used on Logan's Run. And that's this one. No, it's our
2600.
Oh, the 2600, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
he bought it.
Actually,
He replaced
it
it with
used on Logan's Run.
this one was used on Logan's Run.
Wow.
This has a huge history. I even did helicopters for Apocalypse Now on this because the Nagras couldn't record the low frequency, so we enhanced the helicopters for the sound effects guys with a bunch of synthesizer guys. Paul Beaver and Clark Spangler invited me. I was just a kid. I was like 15. I was in high school.
Isn't it crazy that ARP are so big in like cinematic history in terms of, like, yeah, you just mentioned that R2D2 was an ARP 2600. There was the ARP 2500 on Close Encounters. I mean, it was they're everywhere, aren't they?
Well, I don't know if they don't get enough attention. Moog kind of had the name, but there's this. They're beautiful.
Yeah,
they can do so much, and the design is so elegant. And you know, the routing, the audio signal flows horizontally, and the control signal flows vertically. It's so visually clear. It's not confusing. Like what I can in 5 minutes help someone really understand synthesis on this synth way more than on other ones that don't really make as much sense visually.
The funny thing is, the guys that you're talking about, the directors that you're talking about, or we're talking about, you know, the people that did, you know, Steven Spielberg and whatever, all those guys were bringing in the ARPs because guess what? They looked like the kinds of things that we saw in the comics. You know, they looked like space stuff. They had bleeps and lights and knobs and patch cords, and that looked like our childhood, our comic childhood. So of course they became references in films rather than the Moogs. I mean, they just look so damn good. The 2500. I mean,
yeah, that's a freaky instrument.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
because
instrument.
we had Dina Perlman. She's been on the show a couple of times. She's a big friend of ours, and you know she runs the Alan R. Perlman Foundation. And we were talking to her, and I've talked to her many times about her father's use of color schemes within his synthesizers, particularly if you look at the 2500. All of those colored knobs, there's a reason for, you know, all of those colors to be in those places and used for those functions, and the way it all connects up. It's stunningly good stuff. And I guess it's very, you know, they look amazing on screen, so you know, why not? And they sound incredible. So that's just amazing.
He thought about that, whereas the Moog, the modules could be anywhere depending on how you purchased it. They'll put oscillators wherever you want and the sequencer wherever you want, you know. They had a certain thing with the P1, P2, and P3 series, but they would lay it out a certain way. But a lot of systems are just all over the place, and you're catching from one side to the other. It doesn't flow from left to right, and also the horizontal, the vertical flow on these. It's so easy to see. Like I can tell you what it's going to sound like by looking at it.
Yeah.
Moog, it's pretty hard to be like following the patch chords, and then they go back to the left, and then back to the right. You know.
Yeah, but the 2600 was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, was originally designed like as a teaching synth, wasn't it? It was designed so that you could, because you don't have to have cables, you can just route stuff internally as well, can't you?
Well, yeah, it has normal, like stuff's normal with no patch cords.
Semi-normal, yes.
Yeah, exactly,
right. Yeah, that's a great thing. Well, a lot of synths, though, were designed for universities, you know. Even the Synclavier came out of a university. It just seems like they always kind of start there, and then they have to get out of there if they can. If they warrant it, they can get out of there and catch on and get into pop music and movies, ads and everything else. But they did a lot of, like, Moog, the same thing. Herb Deutsch was a university guy, and he was convincing Bob Moog, like, you got to put a keyboard on this thing. You know, that was what he had a major influence on.
Oh yeah,
that instrument, and having like the ability to have voltage control and play a synthesizer in what we would call like Western music, you know, and not just like spacey sounds and pitch continuums.
Yeah, yeah, amazing stuff. So you've got your 2600, and what was next for you? Were you just like a musician gigging, or just messing around at home? How did you get to take that hobby to a living?
Well, having the 2600 when you're like whatever it was, when I actually bought it, I was probably 16, close to 17 years old. And I was working on it with Clark Spangler, who was the session synthesist in LA. And the CS80 just came out. So I learned the CS80 when it first came out. Wow. And I was kind of taking lessons with him at David Abel Piano Store on Beverly Boulevard before it opened. And my parents would I didn't have a license when I was first starting. They drove me there before the store opened, and Clark would come in and teach me how to program. Like I learned programming from the guy that learned it from Paul Beaver, who was responsible for the Nonesuch Guide to Electronic Music, which is the first recorded synthesizer waveforms and that sort of thing in sort of a organized fashion and also a teaching fashion. So I learned from Clark, and then Clark, he was so busy, when he couldn't go on a session, he would send me. And he would, I had to charge double scale. And so I'd go to these sessions and they go like, where's Clark? Because he wouldn't even tell them, because he didn't want me to get hired because I'd be cheaper.
Right.
Still nervous. Like sidemen were, there's sidemen syndrome.
Yeah.
And it was awesome to be able to get that opportunity. So I would get paid double scale at 16 years old, and I could put it towards buying more synths and turn up on sessions and play on records. My first session was with Lamont Dozier. It was a Motown session.
Oh man!
CS80 for John Barnes.
Wow!
It was crazy. But then I put together a band with another kid who had the same piano teacher that worked at the piano store at David L. Abel, and we wrote out an arrangement of Beethoven's Eighth Symphony for 6 CS80s, and we divided the symphony up into bass, lower strings, upper strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion, and effects. So we would block, but Beethoven blocked out very well. So we both went through the score and rewrote the parts, and we wrote books out, and we found keyboard players. They couldn't program, but we would basically put like a brass sound on the CS80, because you could basically with the CS80 and just changing a couple knobs, like we get it to be really expressive. So you didn't need to change sounds, and we could switch to a few presets. But we blocked it out, and then we started performing on this radio station in Los Angeles that was the classical station on Sunday afternoon concerts, like live classical music on 6 CS80s. And we did this in 1977, 78, 79, up until maybe 80. And we got the attention of like the film studios. And they're going, what's that sound? Can we use that sound on a film? So that eventually led to Blue Thunder, which was directed by John Badham, coming off of Saturday Night Fever, which was a huge hit.
Yeah. And
Roy Scheider was in Blue Thunder, and he was coming off of Jaws, which is another huge hit. So we got ourselves like, and I was like 21, in working on this score, creating a new sound, and then that caught on, and people started hearing it, and everyone wanted us to do it. Then we did War Games with John, and then I did Starman with Jack Nietzsche. These were the earlier days where I was like creating the sounds and then doing the arrangements like I did on the Beethoven symphonies of their 6-line sketches. So instead of them sending their composer 6-line sketches to an orchestrator, they would send it to Brian and I, and we would like get it out there and put it on synths. And then I purchased a 24-track 2-inch, stuck it in my house so I could dump the sounds down, because they wanted to hear it, and you could only play one line at a time. And then I bought a synclavier in the early days, 1981, and started using that sequencer, but still dumping to tape. And it just built up from there. Then the advertising community is like, what's that sound in the movies? We want it in our commercials.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it just how things go.
Yeah, it's just, success breeds success, I guess. And you just happen to be in the right place at the right time for a lot of it. And of course you had, the skills for it as well.
Yeah, and I think you add that to the desire
to
to just keep turning up, be on time, and take risks, because it was a lot of risk at that age to buy a $40,000 Synclavier and get a loan
Yeah.
and try to talk to a bank. It's like, what is a computer? Like, people didn't have computers in their house, and I'm buying like a mainframe computer that's like
Yeah.
5 feet tall, and I'm 22. It's just there was a lot of risk taking, but I didn't know any better, so maybe it wasn't as risky.
And that was with the FM Synclavier, the FM
Originally,
voice.
yeah, it was only an FM.
But
control.
what FM? What
Yeah.
FM? It's just it's lovely.
Because it was
Yeah.
was it 32 voice, wasn't it? If you had 32 voice FM,
Right.
in the you
Bought
seem to
it.
think,
You had to buy the voices. They came
Yeah.
in groups of 8.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask you about that because I've got I'm renowned, I guess, for my love of Fairlights, and of course the other machine, was the Synclavier, and these were these two great machines that bands. I mean, very famously, supposedly the Police broke up because Stuart Copeland wanted the Fairlight. That was his thing, but Sting was all about Synclaviers, and so there was big arguments, and that was the straw that broke the proverbial camel's back. But how did you discover the Synclavier? Because I think the first one came out in 77, the one which was just very rudimentary and basic, and then the two then really took it to the kind of next level.
I got
didn't it?
mine in 81, but the way I discovered it, there was a guy named Tom Moody who was in charge of doing the promotion for NBC News, which was one of the 3 major networks here, but it was the local news, the Los Angeles affiliate of NBC, National
Right.
Broadcasting Company, right? So he was just doing local news, and he bought like an early Synclavier. He just like got them to spend the money on it, thinking, hey, I'm going to do all the music for this and win a bunch of awards, but he didn't know how to use it at all. And so he heard about Brian and I, what we were doing, and said, hey, you guys want to write this music, and here's this Synclavier. And so we just learned it. And by learning it, it was like, okay, now we have to have this. And then, we got introduced to it wasn't Brad Naples immediately, but it was like Sid and Cameron. Sid Alonso was the hardware developer, inventor, and Cameron Jones was the software designer and inventor. And they were the co-owners of the company. And so we just had to figure out a way. And that's how I got a $40,000 loan from David Abel, the guy that owned the piano store where I would go every Saturday morning, and just said, like, hey, we got to find a way to get this Synclavier. And then once we got the Synclavier, we got in with the company because we were like young guys that were we were exciting to be around, and we were doing all these projects and putting the Synclavier on it and putting our credit on screen at the end that would say Synclavier Digital Music System programmed and performed by, and then our names, so we just got in with the company and helped them develop it, and in exchange for free stuff, which would be more voice cards, a second system, so I could have one in the studio and one for sessions. And the thing costs like by the time I was done, I had 3 systems that were over $200,000 each. That I bartered my way through, and then I had to buy a lot of stuff too because they wouldn't do it. The president was a little rough on us sometimes, but I worked my way through it. It takes a lot to get it to happen. That's why I really brought in that element of risk taking, and trial and error too, because we goofed a few times on things, but we never quit, and so that's built a relationship with Synclavier. It was awesome, and I just interviewed Cameron. I haven't put it out yet, but like about 6 months ago.
Oh wow, that'll be a cool one.
About the whole thing, how it happened in a university. He was Sid's student.
Yeah, because I'm trying to remember was it Dartmouth?
Yes.
University? Yeah, up there in New England, wasn't it?
White River Junction, Vermont was where
Vermont,
the company was, but Hanover, New Hampshire it's right next door. It's like you could throw a stone from one to the other, and Dartmouth was in Hanover, and that's where they were.
Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind that you're so young and you are now using one of the most. I mean, people come to me and say, "Oh, Fairlights, they used to cost as much as a house." I think you've never bought a Synclavier back in the day when it was like 4 times, 5 times as much. It was just stunningly capable machine, but just hugely expensive. And here you are at such a tender age, really, becoming a master of it, and because of its capabilities, I guess, and what it could do, you're making a name for yourself.
Quick secret tip for everybody. When something's really expensive, the people that have the money and the wherewithal to afford it usually don't have the time and energy or brain power to figure it out. So when you see those situations and you're a young person and you have the energy and the wherewithal and the brain power to figure it out, find that person, and then suddenly they need you.
Yeah, make yourself indispensable.
Isn't it funny that sometimes when you take the risk with gear, especially when we were all younger and we took risks, I bought one of the early Emu ones and I bought all sorts of other stuff, DX5s, God knows what else. When you buy, and a 2600, when you buy this stuff, it really is a big investment, and you don't know how you're going to afford. You find a way to afford it, but guess what? If you're the first on the block to afford it, you'll always make money back from it, because people will want to work with you because you've got this brand new sparkly thing, and you can charge what you need to charge to make it pay. And every time I've bought a piece of kit like that, it's always paid for itself. Have you found the same thing, Anthony?
Well, what I found is what I had to do was one extra step. I had to make what I do on it the only game in town, because then somebody else could buy the gear, they could have more money, but it goes back to like having the wherewithal and the energy and the brain power to just hammer it out and be like better on it than anybody could be.
In your case, it was be the Mr. Synclavier.
Yeah, I mean, well, not Mr. Synclavier, but Mr. Creative. Like, put me in front of anything, and that I don't care if I share all my secrets and tips with you, because now go do something with them, because that's what matters.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah,
it is.
Absolutely. Just before we move on, I just want to go to our chat. Guests, our audience. First of all, I just want to bring in the wonderful Dina Perlman of the Alan R. Perlman Foundation. She says, tell Anthony I say hello and love the background gear. So look, there you go.
There's two of them too. There's another one sitting up above. I had 4 of them. Like my setup. Oh, wait, there we go. Right, you can see both of them. But my original setup, I had 4 of them. I had a Tonus, and then I had that other one, the later one with the treble clef, and then the orange face, we call it the Halloween. 2600, but that was my instrument, like 4 of them, and then I had a sidecar 2500 module. If I really had to make a sound, and I would always fight people like the ARP is the one for me, not the Moog, and I'm good on a Moog, and I learned on a Moog at USC, but we talked. I hope you heard the intro, how special I thought what your dad did in terms of his design for musicality and clarity and speed, which was really necessary for me. There's no synth like it.
Yeah, no, cool stuff. Let's go back and see.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just want to acknowledge.
Jump in.
Do you guys know each other by?
No, we've never met. But I feel like I'm connected to whatever. I mean, I don't want it to be presumptuous or anything, but like, he's just like his face and the connection to because I know there's a person behind it. It didn't just happen, and it probably was like any great thing, a very difficult path to make this happen. So I have like deep appreciation. I think about it, every time I play it.
Yeah. Dina's does wonderful work, and she's a dear friend of ours, and she's been on the show a few times. I will put you two guys in touch after the show. I'll look. We've made her cry. Look, now I'm weepy. Bless you.
Bless you.
I will put you two in touch, because I think you two would have a lot to talk about, and I think that'd be amazing. How else we got? Robert has just popped into the chat. $4.99. Thank you ever so much, sir. Good to see you. Hope you're keeping well. What else have we got? We've got some other donations I just want to highlight here. Matt Evans, thank you very much indeed for your donation. Much appreciated. Good to hear you got that Mac back up and running and 40 degrees cooler than it was before. And very own Manny Fernandez. Clark Spangler is an unsung hero and great guy. He did a class at UCLA in the 80s, and he took us to see Anthony and Brian Banks show off the Synclavia's brand new timbre frame resynthesis. Cool
Yes.
stuff. Thank
That's
you.
Manny?
Tell us about that. Yeah, that's Manny. Yeah.
Wow. Hi, Manny. I can't believe these people are coming on the show. Yeah, Manny took lessons with Clark. I mean, I remember going to UCLA to do that, but Manny was like another prodigy. I mean,
I
of
know.
Clark. So, man,
He is sickeningly talented.
yeah.
In
I
fact,
haven't talked to you in so long, but thank you for jumping in.
Yeah, he's always here. But basically, when we do the show, it's usually during his lunch break for work, doing the day job. So he'll pop in and say hi. He is going to be joining me, and I'll get this out here now. A little bit of self-promotion here. Synthfest this year in UK, October 7th. Manny is flying over, not especially for us, but he's managed to wangle this into his kind of wedding anniversary tour that he and his lovely wife are doing.
Oh, congratulations.
And he's going to be coming to the UK, and he's going to be joining me on stage, and we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, the DX7, because it's 40 years old this year, and we're going to be looking at how the DX7 and FM technology is kind of still relevant
Yes.
today with the Modi X and montage and all of that stuff.
Manny could kill me. He would just destroy me on a DX7. Yeah, I mean, I remember.
destroy anyone.
I've learned so much from that guy. It's untrue.
I should take some lessons on that thing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And don't let it slide. Wedding anniversaries are the biggest of all accomplishments. And the most
Yeah.
important.
Absolutely, and best celebrated on a tour around Europe, coming into Sheffield as well to come and talk about synthesizers. I think that was amazing how we've managed to work that one in there.
Well, if you have the wife, then you can celebrate that way. That's even more amazing.
That's it. Right, Mr. Spong has joined us.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Right, I have made it.
Oh dear.
Nice
Yeah,
to meet
sorry
you.
about that.
Yep. Kent meet Anthony. Anthony meet Kent.
Hi, Ken.
Hello.
There
All
we
right,
go.
mate.
Fantastic.
Up to 600. Okay.
Yeah, two.
Okay.
There's two. There's
Okay.
another one. Yeah.
Another one. All right.
Another one. Yeah. Look, there
Upstairs.
is. Yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah,
don't know.
For
Like,
one
vertically,
point.
it's easier to patch them. You know.
Yeah. And Kent, that one that's right behind Anthony's head there was used on Logan's Run. Used to belong to Jerry Goldsmith.
Oh, what?
I mean, if you're going to have a 2600,
Yeah.
that's going to be
Well,
the one to
yeah,
have.
I guess so. I guess so. Oh, by the way, just
Also,
to
similar
just to
bass.
dispel a rumor that I passed, and apparently it's not true.
Go on.
Hans Zimmer's 2500 is not nailed to the wall in the foyer
course.
of his studio. I
That was a nasty rumour.
Yeah, I hit him up and I said, "Have you nailed my 2500 to the wall?" And he's got, "No." He says, "I've lent it to Mr. Newton Howard." I went, "Well, that's not nailed to the wall." Oh, okay, cool, all right.
Why would you nail it? You mean like to ruin it?
So no, to display it, as it were.
Like a decoration. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's 3 wings and a 2500. It's sort of like, no, don't display that.
Yeah.
That's not,
It's
you don't
the
need to do that.
2500 to rule them all,
Yeah.
that one.
But I can't remember who told me now because I want to come and
Why I oughta-
yeah, why I smack you in the head, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just finish up. I just want to crack through some of these here. We'll get to the questions. Ben, are you able to do user questions in just a moment? Yeah. I want to kick off with this one because I've got loads more stuff to ask Anthony. Particularly, I want to focus next on of the thing that's been at the forefront of Anthony's work in the last year or so, and then that's talking about Thriller and all of that, because that's just an area that fascinates me, and I'm sure lots of other people. But Wagyu, who is our resident expert in the chat, has donated 10 Swiss francs. Thank you very much indeed. And he has a question, and we all want to know about the Synclavia doing the intro to Beat It. But what did Weird Al use for the intro to Eat It? Was it a DX7 doing a vague Synclavia impression? Any ideas on that one, Anthony?
I don't know.
No. We'll talk about the whole Beat It thing, because you did a little video, didn't you? With
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely speak to the sounds that I made, but I don't know. I'd have to hear it.
Yeah.
If you think it's a DX7, it's very likely.
Yeah. Because I'm sure it's capable, isn't it? I've never tried to do the Beat It sound on a DX7. Maybe that's something.
Well,
It's FM,
I don't
isn't
know. It's 4 partial timbres on a synclavier, so you can check with Manny on this. But the way the operators are set up, You can't get 4 operators because you have 6, right? You would
Yeah.
have to have 8, and then you would have to have one modulating another, one modulating another, one modulating another, one
Gotcha.
modulating another. So then you would have 4 literal ones with FM.
Mm.
And I don't think
Yeah.
you can get that architecture, but you could get it close. I mean, you could get it
Yeah.
with 3 of them, but then the sound is chorused. So you would have
Yeah.
to like run it through a separate chorus, because the DX7, you wouldn't be able to make another copy of all of those operators. So you couldn't really match it. You could make
Yeah.
something similar, like belly type of FM sound.
Well, of course you can. Everyone knows the DX7's for its bells.
I made a video of the exact, like, off of the factory sound that was used on it.
Yeah.
And I also interviewed Tom Baylor, who brought his synclavier in and turned Michael and Quincy onto the synclavier with the blue record. And that's where Michael, that's why he even wanted the synclavier there, because he heard the blue record and the sound that Denny Yeager made, which
Of
was
course.
the needed
Yeah.
sound. And then he said, so Tom brought his synclavier in, and then they just called up that patch. And that's how I got on Thriller.
Yeah.
Because Tom could only call up presets. And so he said, oh, well, call Brian and Anthony. And then we turned up with the synclavier and then
This is
went on to work with Quincy.
here you go. Manny's just said, I have a Beat It gong sound on the DX7 too.
We
Well,
need
maybe-
to hear that. We need
Can the
to hear
DX7 2 get like 4 basic separate FM sounds at the same time?
It can do 2 because it's bitimbral. I was just wondering if you could do it on a TX816 because that's essentially 8 DX7s in a box.
I'm sure you could get close.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just, you know, they're all really weird FM ratios, though.
Yeah, but
In
yeah.
normal, it's
Well,
like,
I watched that video that you did with Kevin Maloney, which
Yeah.
is brilliant. If anybody wants to know more about the Synclavier, I mean, you've got Anthony and Kevin. Kevin was like the product specialist in the LA store. And
Yes.
you're probably the leading Synclavier guy out there in the field. And then you've got these two guys talking together. It's fascinating stuff, guys. I seriously recommend you go and watch it.
Kevin's great. It's like
Yeah.
the back of his hand. The synclavier.
Yeah, we need to get that guy on the show as well, don't we?
Yeah.
A few more donations. Just want to say thank you very much, Dina. $10 for your super sticker. Thank you, and Mr. Andrew Brooks, fascinating guest, great stuff. Thank you very much, and
Thank you.
Andy. Great to see Anthony here. So many cool techniques and story vids on this channel. Lots of history. Absolutely, couldn't
Thank you. This
agree.
is great that you have this stuff coming in and we can see who sends it. And
Yeah, absolutely. And say if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate. Stick them in the chat, but a big capital Q in front of it because our eyesight's not that great, and it will just help us stick it into the bucket of which Ben is about to dive into, sir. So
Yeah.
I reckon you should start off with, I don't know, maybe Xanthos.
You know what? I was actually going to start off with that one because
Yes.
I wanted to see a fight. That's
Yeah.
that's what I wanted to see.
Here you go.
So, Xantho Zanfagni, I hope I'm saying that right.
Zanfagni, yeah.
Yeah, it asks Synclavier versus Fairlight, who's the winner and why for you? And I just love that question. That's a great question.
is that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean,
And welcome to it.
Okay. Well, I never used a Fairlight on a session, but I did go on a reconnaissance mission to Sydney,
Yeah.
and I
Heard
met
this
a guy named Spencer who was like the leading guy there, like going on sessions. And I found myself in the middle of the Fairlight community, and I made friends with all those people, and I really learned a lot about how it worked. But I don't really think of them as I know they were just competitors for some reason, but they don't really sound the same to me.
No.
Like that's the thing. Like I can hear a Fairlight and I go, okay, that's a Fairlight, and I hear a Synclavier. The architecture is really different, and then the way you mix and match FM and sampling on the Synclavier, it's like fighting mixed martial arts against a boxer or something.
yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, Fairlight's like a great boxer for doing certain types of things, but the Synclavier is like so mixed martial arts because it's a recording studio because of the direct to disc. You know, you could have like multi-track recording at 100K
Yeah.
back when they didn't even, it was compared to tape back then.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're allowed to put it in context, because otherwise, like comparing it today, it's like It doesn't even compare to a DAW.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
No.
it was so crazy what you could do on a Synclavier, but Fairlight was just a lot more compact, and that light pen was pretty cool, you know, and quick, but it didn't have the resolution of the Synclavier, but then it had a charm in terms of sound for pop music.
Yeah.
And for movies, whenever I heard a movie on Fairlight, I immediately knew it was Fairlight, and it was really quirky. Like, I didn't hear like great orchestral simulations out of the Fairlight, but when I heard Liquid Sky, that was all Fairlight.
Yeah,
I was
that's
like,
right.
wow, that is just trippiest sounding. I want to sound like that for something. It would sound like an acid trip, like orchestral texture, but it wasn't orchestral sounds.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to fight them together.
Yeah, I don't think it's something you can, because they did things differently. I think the reason people often, you know, try and face them off against each other is because they were both incredibly expensive, and they were both computer based, and they were both you know, kind of mythical beasts. But as you said, you know, Synclavier started off as an FM synth, then brought in sampling, probably because Fairlight started with the sampling, although in fact Fairlight was actually a fast Fourier transform additive synthesizer to start with, and the sampling was just a workaround because they weren't getting the sounds they wanted from the additive stuff. So they both did completely different things, and as you say, with Fairlight, it's not just the sound, but it's also the impact of Page R and the sequencing that gave you those kind of that feel, that Fairlight feel to the sound, not just the actual tones as well. So they are completely kind of different machines, but also, you know, with some sharing. And I think, you know, I mean, I speak to Peter Vogel and Kim Ryrie quite a bit, and you know, I think there was an element of when one machine did something, the other guys said, oh, now we've got to try and maybe do something that's better than that, or expands upon that, because I think Fairlight obviously was sampling first, and sampling came to the Synclavier after that. But then Synclavier brought in digital multi-tracking, and then Fairlight came up with that after they had done it. So there was always this kind of one-upmanship, I think, and maybe there's, you know, a quiet rivalry there somehow.
There was, and anytime you had like something with a computer screen on it, then you would be comparing them, because there was nothing else that had a computer screen. So then they're just strictly, they're not competing on sound and features from a musical point of view. That's what I think. But they're competing for market share of somebody that wants to do what, you know, we were saying earlier, like buy an adventurous instrument and do something different. They were competing for that. And market share was everything, because the success of the companies was going to depend, because they were so leveraged due to the technology demand on their capital. And so
I think the other thing that was really interesting about the two of them doing the 80s, through the 80s and going up into the 90s, was the Fairlight was almost the de facto expensive sampler for pop production, for rhythmic production. That, you know, Page R and everything it did was very much of that. It was that sound and that way of working. What was really interesting was, even though the Synclavier could do that stuff standing on its head as well, it was used more for music, you know, for more orchestral, more organic sounding. It was used a lot, which is why it ended up working in film so much as well, I'm sure. Although I think you're probably a bit to blame for that as well, Anthony. But it had a sound to it which was extraordinarily organic and real, whereas the Fairlight was very definitely, even though it also sampled up to, I think it sampled up to 100K
on the Series 3s, yeah.
Yeah, not in the beginning though. It was only 30.
Yeah,
that's right. And so it had a sound, and it had that data compressed sound that was really good for pop, really, really good for music, for rhythmic stuff, dance music. The Synclavier just went beyond that, and it had, you know, that's why the two camps sort of developed. So Fairlight in the studio for pop, and the Synclavier was very definitely post production film scoring, and people like Martin Offer, of course, who used it for his things, and you know, it was really interesting seeing that divide in the 80s.
Yeah, and price points make a big difference in terms of perception, because it'd be like a Jaguar. Because I did a lot of music for that company, and I learned that the cars don't really cost that much more than any car, because they all go through the same wind tunnel tests and all this stuff. But they charge way more for the badge. And there's a big perception difference when you go into a session with a synclavier versus something else, because the people that are paying you think, well, now I'm really getting my money's worth, because it's not based on music or what the things that the instruments could do, or even the cars can do in a lot of sense, because people buy these expensive, like Ferraris even, and they drive them on the street and you can only go a certain speed limit. But it's the perception of where you turn up. You're not really utilizing the musical ability of the thing or of the car. And that perception thing is what was a big driver during the 80s, because think about the 80s socially was one of the most perception-driven decades in history. Yeah. And partly why a lot of great stuff came out, partly why a lot of really stuff you'd never want to be seen in relation to, exists.
Oh, you've heard my productions. Okay.
I'm not even going to try to get serious with you guys.
Still got the headache.
I just want to say, Kissing the Machine, thank you very much indeed. £10, great stuff. Never feel guilty about having two of the same synth again. You should never feel guilty. Never feel guilty about owning any, let alone two. I'm guilty of that myself.
What's
Simon
guilty?
What? Sorry?
What's guilt?
You have no concept
Two?
of guilt. Yeah, two.
Only two?
Yes. Well, yeah. I was over yours. I
Try
know you've
harder.
got multiple there. Also, Simon Greatbatch, £10. Thank you very much indeed. Awesome guest. Absolutely could not agree more.
Thank you very much, you guys. This
Yeah,
is very generous. I appreciate everybody just showing up to
Oh, man.
engage in synthesizer talk, because
It's
died in the 90s. We were all selling these great instruments for garbage, like single rack things. And then oh no, what did I do? Now we're realizing it, but it's back, and it's because everybody found it and cares about it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of heartache going to put these things together now and keeping them work. So, like, to everybody out there, I'm so grateful and thankful that there's like appreciation for it.
Yeah.
And some great new music.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. I want to, because I'm conscious of the time, I want to talk about Thriller, because I think that is the biggest selling album of all time. It's a massively influential album. And of the 9 tracks, correct me if I'm wrong, you worked on 7 of those, programming and playing, various instruments. I just wondered if we could just start off. You mentioned about Quincy finding out about you and the synclavier and saying, getting you in to do that. How did that all kind of kick off? What was the beginning of the Thriller experience for you?
For me? Well, I mean, it came through Tom Baylor. Like I said earlier, he wrote "She's Out of My Life," and he was the associate producer on Off the Wall, which people don't always know that, but he was really close with Quincy. Did a lot of the arranging, and he also did the arrangement for "We Are the World." He's an amazing singer and vocal arranger. So, coming from Tom, it was like a high endorsement. But the thing is with Quincy, like if you get brought into the room on a Quincy session, this is what I've learned over time. You're immediately like, everybody knows that's part of Quincy's family, that you're now part of the family. He's very he makes a big point of creating like this loving atmosphere when he works, because he likes to be in that type of vibe, and he speaks like sometimes in those kinds of like emotional terms when he describes things to you. So you're greeted with this big hug, which I wasn't used to, like walking into a session and getting hugged. And then I was just thrown in the room, and it's like, let's see what you can come up with. Here's Baby Be Mine, and I'm like, there I go. It was just right away. But I had every synth in Los Angeles that I could get my hands on delivered there, because I just asked, what am I going to need? So I just had I had like 2 cartage companies bringing truckloads and borrowing stuff from friends. Billy Childs let me borrow his OBX, and because I didn't have every synth back then, and that's how it started. And then we just kept staying on, like it's day to day. But once they like what you're doing, and then I was working with Rod a lot, because Rod was in charge of all the arrangements. That all came from Rod. Like he demoed all these songs himself with whatever synths he had.
Yeah.
And then we would sort of match the sounds, and then Michael would come in and say, now I want to try something like this, and he would play sounds on a record player.
Okay.
from Prince or the Time or whatever, and then even like an old Fred Astaire album, and say, "What's that? How do we get that kind of sound?" You know, very inquisitive, and he always wanted something unusual, or that's part of his nature. And then he was like really calm, and then when he'd get excited, he'd start moving around. And that was always great. You're watching this guy dance, and it wasn't really out yet, like that level
Yeah.
of talent, because he had just done Off the Wall, and Michael was like a performer on Off the Wall. On Thriller, he became an artist, and then on Bad, he became like a songwriter and starting to take over producing. So there was an evolution happening. Thriller was like the perfect storm of Michael being able to just only focus on the best thing that he could do, which was be a singer and put together a vision that's different and incorporate like choreography in the music. And that led to MTV, and Quincy was a film composer who could just oversee it all. And Rod was an amazing like songwriter and arranger. And then Greg Phillinganes focused on playing his butt off of these sounds, like, and Bruce Swedeen and Matt Forager were in charge of just engineering. Like today you make a record and one guy does everything.
Yeah.
So that's why Thriller stands out. Now, that doesn't automatically make it be like in the last 40 years, but it didn't hurt, because the way that thing went down, right? I mean, to do that again, I mean, how do we do that again? Let's get somebody to throw down the money and just bring in like, and do it like that and see what happens. Maybe you can't recreate it, but I think it's really important to point out how that record was the perfect storm. And then after that, that didn't happen again for Michael, because then the composer, producer, songwriter came in, and the collaborations, and it wasn't the same as just a specialist that did one thing. Coming together and all getting along too, not trying to be a co-writer or any of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Big difference. And it only happened once for me ever, and that was during Thriller.
Yeah.
How long did that go on for? Sorry.
No, go. Yeah.
What, Thriller?
Yeah. How long were you doing that for?
I was there about 2.5 weeks, but Thriller had gone on for like a year. I mean, they demoed everything, and that's another part of Quincy's process, is like picking the songs, and it was always best song wins, and that's how it was on Thriller. On Bad, it wasn't always that. It had to do with who wrote it. It was best song wins. So it went on for like a year because they were trying to find the best song, and then they'd find the best songs and then say, but now these collection of 9 songs, we want to balance them differently. Maybe we'll kick one out because we want a different kind of ballad, or we want something that's like, doing this. There was like, they would listen to pop music and see what was going on, and they were trying to create like a cohesive album too. So it took a long time to put it together. And then another thing that was different about Thriller is like it was demoed and finished, and then we came in and redid the whole thing. And then they mixed it and did a release party, and then hated it even after it was done. Remixed, took this like weekend off. Everyone went home, and then they remixed it again. So it was always this striving to just do it better. How can this be the best possible, with the pressure of outdoing Off the Wall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Pretty well.
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Rod Temperton there, and he's our Brit in the room, shall we say? He's famously this guy from the north of England, who is now writing some of the greatest pop songs for, arguably one of the greatest pop performers, certainly of his generation, if not generations before and after. How is it working with Rod? Because he always, we've seen some documentaries recently, and he's always kind of painted as this kind of eccentric, well, not maybe it's an eccentric character, but this guy from England. What's he doing in a studio with the likes of Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones? And then there was another question I had about Rod, and it was to do with the rhythm in Thriller. And I've heard stories where it's been told that the concept, the rhythm in Thriller, is actually based on the conga. And I didn't know whether you had any insight into that as well.
Well, first of all, okay, how do you want me to take that in order, like about Rod or about the rhythm?
However you feel most comfortable. I know I've kind of thrown 2 questions. Tell us about Rod first, and then tell us about the conga.
Okay. Well, Rod was definitely a mysterious character, and I figured out how important he was very quickly. But in the beginning, I didn't, I was trying to figure out everybody's roles. You kind of, like I said earlier, they had distinctive roles, but he was like always there and had a lot to say about everything, and everyone listened when he spoke. And he always spoke coming out of a cloud of smoke, which Quincy didn't like. So he would have like this special area where he could really cloud out, But he could do anything. He could play, and he wrote a lot of amazing songs that were on the record. And he had ideas for the arrangements. Like he would sing the lines, and in terms of the sounds, like same thing. But it was super easy to work with him. He liked everything, and he was very easy flowing. Like he would always give you, and the same thing with Michael and Quincy, always like really positive. They didn't say like, I hate that ever. It was just like, can it do this now? I like that. What if we had an option that did something else? So that brings out the best in you. And then also they leave you a lot of noose to hang yourself, which is really exciting, because then you put the pressure on yourself, because they don't think they know everything. They're smart enough to know that. And if you've got some guy in there with a new synthesizer, why should they tell you what it can do? And they wanted to see those things and then how we can incorporate it. So I had a lot of side visits with Rod when no one else was there, and side visits with Michael, because he just liked playing stuff on vinyl and just seeing if I could match it.
Okay.
And then if we could use those, and some of them we couldn't even use, they didn't fit the song, but I would be able to recall them, but not with memory, right? I would have to recall them on a lot of these modular synths just in my own memory. But it was this super flowing between all of them, all the way to the engineering phase. And then Bruce would say like, oh yeah, let me put a little sauce on it or something. And then everyone would go, that's awesome, And it was always monitored at ear-splitting levels that were just like way too loud for me.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how they like to vibe on everything. And then in terms of Thriller, the beat being based on the conga, well, I mean, the song is literally a merengue, which is a Latin song, like da-da-da-da-da-da, boom, da-da-da-da-da-da, boom. It's conga line, dance beat. So people don't really think of it as a Latin style song, but this is indicative of what Michael and Quincy do. They take something and then they make it so much theirs that you don't even know where it came from necessarily. It's so specifically stylized, but at its core, it's a merengue.
Yeah.
So it's based on the conga.
Yeah, because that bass line is, as you say, it's so Latin, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just it's an ostinato, like a Latin bass player that goes boom, 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 and this just goes da 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 da, boom, da da. Yeah, and then they got the clap, but then they push stuff a little bit. It's not like right on the 4. It doesn't go da 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 dum bump da 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 dum bump. It goes da 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 dum bump da 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 dum bump, and that would be Michael. Like, for all I know, and this is just indicative of how things would go, they'd lay down like a basic traditional pattern. Because, like, why reinvent the wheel? This stuff works. But then Michael would come in and go, I really like that, but can we put some funk on it? And then all you have to do is just move it a little bit and push it, and that's how things would flow. With a basic thing, Michael would come in, and Quincy always, spoke in colors and would just basically make sure that everything was locking. Kept it together and making sure he's getting the best of everybody and trying new things. Even a good part, he'd try it again and see and that was Bruce supporting it by coming up with some way to make there be like 100 tracks when everybody else only had 24. He was locking machines.
Awesome.
And then the antics were a big part of it, because when the machines wouldn't work, which would happen, the sync wouldn't happen. Then Michael would take the opportunity to put on a disguise and run to the Beverly Center and see if he could interact with normal people, and then get chased back. And it was fun. I'm brought up that because there was always a fun thing going on. It was, even though there was pressure, the people that were doing it were such characters. Lewis Johnson and Greg Fillinganes was so really fun to work with. Always, still is.
I mean, it definitely comes across in the record, because when you whenever you play Thriller, it's an album that makes you smile. It's just a feel good album, and that's baked in, I guess, at that stage. You know, if you're having fun in the studio, that just gets baked into the whole thing, and the whole record is just it's a joyous.
And then how fun is it? Then all of a sudden, tracks come in from the total rhythm section. Like, that's not fun. And you're going like, I'm going to put some synth stuff over this. Like, yeah, Steve Porcaro and Lukather and Jeff Porcaro. I mean, David Page. I mean, I don't want to leave anybody out, but like Jerry Hay and those horns. Yeah. You're like doubling those horns. Like, can you double that sound? And I'm like, why? Quincy's, saying, let's try it, Yeah. And in Thriller, I ended up doubling it with like synclavier brass that didn't get used, but what they kept was a pipe organ bass pedal double at the beginning that goes ba 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 ba, and then it's just a pipe organ doubling the brass. So, they were really just having fun and trying different things and stretching out the technology with all those tracks. What more could you ask for? And then you have Michael, his voice singing over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, there was a question in there about the Lindrum.
Oh yeah, there was. Who? It's. I can't see that.
Tansophy Music, I think.
Yeah. Who did the Lindrum programming on Thriller?
Well, there were some tracks there that Rod did that were on there, but I did the stuff that went on the final version of the song.
Wow.
And they may have kept something that was pre-existing, but where's my Lindrum? I have the same Lindrum somewhere. I mean, it's going to look like a Lindrum.
Yeah, you showed it to me yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but my friend from high school, because remember, I was like pretty much like still in college, when I was doing it, and I wasn't that removed from high school. So he worked at Lynn. His name was Bradley Cox, and he worked with Roger Lynn. And so I was saying to him, like, how can I get some other sounds? Like, they're using LM1. I don't have an LM1. And he goes, oh, that's easy. I'll burn you some EPROMs of the LM1. So I was going there in the evenings, and he was burning me some of the sounds they used on the LM1 that were similar to, like, the 808 claps and things like that. So,
that's it, yeah.
So he burned me 808 claps, chips, and Lindrum LM1 snare, LM1 hats we used on Thriller. And I put them in my Lindrum so that I could make my Lindrum sound like an LM1 for certain instruments. But like later on, they had these like little bays where you can move the lever and get the EPROM.
Mm-hmm.
Is it called an EPROM? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay, so you could put them in, but they have these little legs on them that are. Let me show you.
We'll just stare at the 2600.
It's not that far away.
Yeah, look at that.
Here's
It's goalless.
Look at that. Yeah.
I'm going to take. You can see what I'm doing.
There you go.
I'm taking the screws out so I can open it up, and I'll just show you what it looked like. Is this too much to do? Like, you guys want to see that?
No, this is gold.
What's really funny is one of the other people in the Bay Area, one of the other companies in the Bay Area that started out doing nothing more than creating sounds for the Lindrum and for the Emu drums was DigiDesign. DigiDesign were originally, I think it was D Design or something like that. They made chips, which then went on, of course, to become Avid, Pro Tools, and all that kind of stuff. But they started out as just making EPROMs for the Lin and the Emu stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I had to get up. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, they made chips for Lin though that went in the Lindrum.
I think it was. Do you know what? I might be getting this a little mixed up. I know they made them for the. I'm sure they made them for the Lindrum as well. I'm sure they did.
All right.
I'm sure
I did
they
it.
did.
I got the other two screws out manually. It's platinum. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if you can see inside here. But
look at that.
That's right. Yeah.
I can smell that. It's one of those things you can smell the inside of a piece of gear. Oh,
Hey,
look at
Kent, take a good look at this, mate.
I've seen enough of them, thanks. This is like a bloody busman's holiday for me. So wait, so you got lockable Ziff sockets fitted?
yeah, but like I didn't have these fancy sockets, but he like gave me some. He rigged up some way that I could like put them in before I had to see the little levers here, so I could easily get them out. So there's an E. You see the little. So these feet they break off pretty. If you don't have a socket like this, that's so easy. Look, it snaps back in. but
Yeah.
something up where I'd put them in, but I had to be really careful, and sometimes I'd break them, and then
Yeah,
I wouldn't have a
bend the legs.
snare. You know, like especially like certain critical things, I didn't want to mess up, but I did, and then the next day I'd have to go back, burn another one, come in, and then I'd have that snare again. So it was like really flying by the seat of our pants, but you know, that's what we did.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I mean,
this
Get
guy
them caps changed.
Yeah.
what?
Get them caps changed. See those two purple caps there?
Yeah.
These?
They're old enough. Get them out. Get them changed over.
Will it change
Yeah.
the sound?
No. No.
Why do I have
that's-
to do it?
What they do is after a while, they will leak onto the board,
Oh,
and your board is dead. But judging by that colour, I'm placing them at about 30 odd years old.
well, they're original. Like whenever the Lindrum
Yeah.
came out, like,
Yeah.
this was the first Lindrums. I mean, I just had to get it to do. Thriller.
Absolutely. Yeah. No,
haven't
get somebody to change them out for you if you can, because it's better to get them out before they go.
You know Bruce Forat?
Yeah.
He owns Lindrum now. He bought it. And
That's
he was
right,
one
yeah.
of the original guys there way back then. And he makes
Yeah.
these chips now and he puts his name on them. But
Yeah.
he's the
Brilliant.
place to go for any drum machine because that's really like he's the expert, has
Oh,
all
yeah,
the parts.
He does
No,
amazing
thank-
work on Akai's and let's say
Any,
Lins as well.
yeah. All those, you're right. All those things, those like composer boxes from Roland and Akai, and writes cool music and patterns and stuff on them. He's a really fun hang, but he's here. So I don't know. There's the Lindrum inside, but that's how we rolled back then. So much
Yeah.
easier now.
I mean, the Lindrum, it's one of the things. It's one piece of gear I don't yet own, and the emphasis on the word "yet." I will get one day.
Yeah.
But it is such an important drum machine because of what it gave us sonically, and it changed so much in terms of drum patterns. You know, it was
yeah.
just such an important thing.
Oh, let me show you something funny. I'm gonna come back.
Oh, more. There's more.
He's up again.
More.
This is great. Do we have
Half
to
of this
stop?
stuff I got in the garage. Did you see that fab filter while you were in the garage?
So I'm back.
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah.
Yeah, in a stacker box.
So before I had the Lindrum, all I had was this.
That was the
Yeah.
first drum machine I ever played with.
That was the first one I
DR55.
played with.
I think
Right.
a lot of people of our age would probably say the DR55 was the first time they ever got their hands on a drum machine.
Yeah, and it had like but you can only drive. This had to be the master.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
You could drive the sequencer and get some cool things to happen with these two, outputs. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
could
yeah.
get rhythmic things. I've still got one of those. That's super cool. I sing the Body Electric, and then I upgraded to this one, which was the
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, I think I had one of those as well.
twice as good as the 55. It's the 110.
It's the 110. Yeah.
It has a couple of really great sounds, but like I can't go into a Thriller session with that. And I had an 808. I was quick on an 808, but that wasn't like the sound. Like it was
Yeah.
for that kind of R&B thing, a Michael thing. That wasn't it.
Yeah.
So I had to. That's why I got the Lindrum, because I was like, I can't bring these things in.
Yeah. So tell us about the Synclavier and Thriller, and let's start with the most iconic sound, which is of course the Beat It gong at the beginning, which, as you mentioned before, there was this Blue Demonstration vinyl record with Danny Yeager's sounds all over it,
Right.
and there was this 7-note phrase with that sound, but not just that sound, that phrase, that musical phrase,
Yep.
is identical. And of course, it's kind of, over the decades has become, lots of stories have been told who copied who and all this kind of stuff. So, I know you've mentioned when you did your video with Kevin, you go into great detail. You have the record there, you have the Synclavier there, you talk about how that sound is in there. But tell us a little bit about that sound, that song, and also how the Synclavier informed, your work on Fairlight. Sorry, on Thriller. Sorry, Freudian slip.
Yeah, nice slip, Rob.
Yeah,
My work on Fairlight, nothing. Well, I haven't released it yet, but I just interviewed Tom Baylor who was the person that, turned Brian and I on to Quincy to do Thriller. And he goes in depth because it was his synclavier. I mean, he's the one that gave the blue vinyl disc to Quincy and Michael, because he was very close with both of them directly, because he wrote She's Out of My Life for Michael, his best, most emotional performance.
Yeah.
And he played the disc for them. And then he bought 12 of them, or maybe they were like $1 or something. You could get them online. And he had a synclavier. He had one of the first ones.
Okay.
So they loved that sound. Michael wanted that sound for Beat It. And Tom brought his synclavier in. It was Tom's synclavier. And it was just a preset that was called up. And it goes through a whole bunch of machinations, like he plays the sound, and then Michael, who has amazing ears, says, that's not it. It's close, but that's not it. And I don't know if I want to give away the whole thing, because it went in the interview. I'm going to release it on my channel at Anthony Marinelli Music, on my YouTube channel. And Tom goes step by step. And this story's never gone out. Tom's 80 years old right now, and it's never really been attributed to how it actually happened. And he's the source. He was the one that was there, and knows like how everyone responded and why they responded, and anything to do with like the copyright nature of it and all that. So I just grabbed that interview. He came to my house, along with how he came up with the idea for She's Out of My Life musically. And he plays the piano in the video, and like it's a combination of music and technology and music history all in one. So it came through Tom. Like, that's the best thing I could answer your question about the Beat It sound. And it triggered the synclavier being like, we got to have this thing on the album. And then Brian and I just took it from there and put it on whatever songs they wanted. I mean, it was sitting in B. Westlake had A and B, basically, two studios going. And, Quincy and Bruce were like in A most of the time, doing all the celebrity stuff. When they'd show up, it was Paul McCartney or, George Martin, all these people would be showing up. And then I was in B like for 2.5 weeks solid, like with no one else, with Rod and Michael and Matt Forger, who was the assistant engineer. And Matt did a lot of the recording of the stuff that I put down. And Bruce would come in for sure. And then we'd go in A occasionally and bring some synths, 3 or 4 synths in. But the B was packed with all of our stuff. And it just went on from there, like coming up with things on whatever instrument it worked on. And my synclavier, don't forget, like the natural routing went through Roland System 100M.
Right.
That's how Yeah, because I was a synth guy, and I was like, I'm not going into a session without a filter.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break.
Straight.
Right? Like, you know how to do one thing on a synthesizer, you know how to call up a preset and move the filter. Like, so I'm not going to give that up just because I have a synclavier. So I can pull up, any sound right away and like make it do something. And then I move the 100M filter and it's doing something, and I could have LFOs and it was quite good. Like the tracking using the synclavier keyboard. So I doubled it with analog oscillators all the time. So those are like 100M oscillators and filters, perfectly tracking with the synclavier's digital quartz controlled pitch capability. So it was they really nailed it. Like whenever synclavier did an interface type of thing, whether it was MIDI or multi-channel distribution or just gates and triggers and control voltage, they really did it right.
Yeah.
So that's another one of my tricks. Like whenever you hear my synclavier stuff, I add analog support in there. It's not just because like an FM sound, sometimes you get this beautiful mid-transparent thing, but then it's like, where's the guts?
Yeah.
Add a little analog. Now you've got a sound that has solid bass or solid mid, but then it moves. The middle moves like FM.
So when did you get the 100? Was that before Thriller? Did you have that for a long while? How did that come about?
Right away. Like as soon as I got a synclavier, I'm like I just said, where's the filter? It's like, well, FM, you don't use filters. Well, okay, my FM is going to go through filters. So I got the 100M like day one. Like as soon as I realized it didn't have a filter, I got a filter.
So you spent 40 grand on this this piece of shit that didn't have a filter. And so you spent another small fortune on a 100M.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Perfect. Makes perfect sense.
I mean, it's just
Perfect
it's
sense.
not going to happen. I'm not going to go on a session and not have that. And,
Yeah.
and, you know, there's perception, like I was saying, like showing up with a single viewer, you're collecting rental on it and all that kind of stuff. But in the end, I have to deliver the quality of sounds, and it's a funk. It's also a funk record, you know, and dance. And it's like FM isn't. I don't want them to be disappointed. I want them to experience the beauty of what FM does, and not have it fail just because it's not presented properly, like plating food or something. If you just put one thing on there, the meal's not as good. There's no balance. You know, you need like a side of asparagus in there or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've got this synclavier, you know, one of the most expensive musical instruments ever created, and it's doing amazing stuff, and it's making these iconic sounds. But on the other side of the coin, and I want you to talk a little bit about the frog sound in Thriller. Which, you know, you've gone from a synclavier to, well, I mean, you've got a video on your channel about this, but just tell our viewers what it was that made that frog sound.
I can't, because I just did a new video 2 days ago.
Oh, no.
The frog sound was the hardest sound of any sound to figure out the source of it.
Uh-huh.
But I finally did. And I had to make phone calls. So I'm like showing on the video the sound, and then I call up Stephen Ray, and he tells me like, yeah, that's the sound, but it doesn't look like it's not the right color. It's like it's a smaller Casio. And then I called up Matt Forger, who was the assistant engineer, and he says the same thing to me. So I've got the sound, and everybody's like convinced it's the sound. And then I call up Greg, and Greg says, yeah, I remember playing it, but I don't remember. Maybe it was that synth. So I did deeper research, and we located the actual track sheet. I nailed it. I found it, and I just can't reveal it yet. But if you watch
There you go.
Music YouTube
Stay
channel,
tuned, people.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like, I'm going to, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm going to ridiculous lengths. I'm going to do it for a year, and then I don't know if I'm going to keep doing this channel, but because it's like sucking me in. It's insanity. But I just think once it's done, because all the people too, like a lot of people passed away that were on the album, and we were all friends. We really felt a lot of connection over the years, and we'd see each other on different sessions or hire each other. And then you see people pass away, and now there's a lot of funny stories and things like this that are inspiring, because partly they're funny because there's like dumb reasons why things happen, but it led to something, like it led to the unexpected, which a lot of times makes things great. And I just want to get those stories out. And I think it's like for the legacy of those great musicians, you know, and to show the lengths that we went through. Like we didn't just take the easy route. Like you can do that now. You could still take the hard route or the road less traveled, let's call it. It's not harder. You know, like you're a seeker more, not just finding the loop and using it, which is great. Like that's good. Now, do you want to try it another level? Maybe it beats it, maybe it doesn't. And that's a lot of the story of what happened with the way we did things then. And listen, I'm not like, I think music today is just as good. I'm a huge fan, and I love doing things like how we do it today, but I just didn't forget how we did things then. I add it. It's like being... Go ahead.
I remember really clearly after Thriller came out, being in a studio. I used to engineer and produce and do all sorts of things. I remember being in a studio and someone was trying to capture the bass sound. They thought they knew what it had been done on, and it just wasn't sounding right. And they were dialing in all the EQ in the world right at the bottom end and compressing it and doing all this stuff. And it's kind of, I don't think that's it. I don't think that's what they've done. So it's really good to hear. It's really good to hear.
I'll tell you
analog with FM. It's great.
Well, no, the Thriller bass wasn't FM. People try to do it on a mini mode, but you don't have pulse width modulation on a mini mode.
Yeah.
And it's single trigger, so you can't play it legato. which in order to get the phrasing right, you have to play it legato to get the long notes and the short notes of that last that low note has to be short, and then everything else to be legato. So the Mini Moog doesn't have multiple triggering, and it doesn't have pulse width modulation. It also doesn't have the ability to get multiple waveforms from the same oscillator. The 2600 does. So I can get pulse width mod on oscillator 2, have an output from this pulse wave, but then also add a sine wave to beef up the fundamental. From the same oscillator. So you put all that together. That's why I programmed the bass on the 2600, because I saw what the line was. And then I would say, well, it has to be on this instrument because of the way you're playing it. Now, Greg didn't know that, but then when he played it, he goes, oh, that's cool. But that's when you're a programmer.
Yeah. Dina was asking there, wasn't she? Talking about patches, particularly 2600 patches. I mean, did you use it on everything that you did on Thriller, the 2600?
A lot of stuff. I think which was the one? PYT bass is 2600. Those are the two really iconic bass sounds that I programmed. They were both 2600 rather than Mini Moog. But I used Mini Moog for a lot of other things where I wanted, like, on the 2600, you can also make it be multiple or single trigger. You see right here?
Yeah.
If you have this keyboard, the 3620 keyboard, the original keyboard didn't have the LFO and the ability to do that. It had the ability to change the octave ratio of the keyboard so you could play quarter tones and stuff like that. But this was better for like Western music. So you can do it here. But the Mini Moog offers other sort of qualities. So a lot of mid-range stuff that's funky, I used the Mini Moog. But like that's where I could point out so many records that people think are Mini Moog bass, and they're not. They're 2600 bass because the 2600's funkier. Yeah. And they found out, like Stevie Wonder, a lot of that stuff was 2600.
Yeah.
And Shake Your Body on Down, like that's 2600. Greg played that bass line on 2600. So you'd be surprised, and if you're trying to do it on Mini Moog, it ain't going to happen the same way.
Yeah. This record has been the bane of my life. You know this, don't you? Because
why?
I had to. The guy had a lot of money, so I'm not going to turn it away. But he got me to modify his Mini Moog, which I think was about 75, 76, something like that, to be able to do multiple waveforms at once, fit an LFO so he could pulse width modulate his square wave on it. Why don't you just buy a 2600? It'd be so much easier.
Did you actually do it?
Yeah, I did it, and managed to get it to multi-trigger as well. And we now affectionately call him the upstairs bathroom. Once he paid.
I've noticed that you often call your customers after parts of the house that have been renovated since they brought their equipment in for work.
Well, look, I've been sitting here listening to this wonderful stuff now, but I haven't heard the word CS80 yet.
Well, we did we touched on it. Yeah. We did touch on it. Yeah,
you up. Like I got started. My whole career got started because I performed on 6 CS80s. I wrote an arrangement of Beethoven's 8th Symphony for 6 CS80s, and I performed live on a classical station. And that's what got the ear of the movie studios to incorporate synthesizers in the movie scores. So I did, a lot of the first scores. I didn't end up using a lot of CS80, a little bit of it. But that's how I got my start, was programming like a CS80. It was my first record date with Lamont Dozier, was programming CS80 for a Motown session, and then the Beethoven stuff. And then I did Debussy Children's Corner and some Bach organ works, all on CS80. Like I performed a ton. Oh, and Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet Fantasy Overture. I did an arrangement of that for CS80. So CS80 is like part of my, heart too.
Yeah. Good man.
It's a performing instrument, and unlike any of these things, it has like a real keyboard and polyphonic aftertouch.
Yeah.
We're all big fan. I mean, Kent obviously is a massive fan. There is a CS80 right to his right, just there. There it is.
One of I think 4 here at the moment. Yes. But I think you can confirm this for me, Anthony. Quincy had a CS80?
I mean, I don't know if he owned one. He didn't bring it.
Right, because
He might have. I don't know.
it. I mean, I signed an NDA on it, but it doesn't mean anything in the real world. But it was supposed to be Quincy Jones's CS80, and it was sold to a guy in Sweden, and it was here briefly, and I just sort of like laid down with it and just hugged it for a while. I just went. I fitted MIDI into
Given
it
it to
for the guy, but
Please, you could have given it to him.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, his socks on.
Yeah. Did because I've heard tell that Michael played the CS80 on some
No.
things. No, that's just.
I mean, if he like, I'll tell you the reason I say no so immediately. I certainly wasn't there to see whether or not Michael played anything.
Oh,
He may have, but Stephen Ray,
Yeah.
who was Quincy's assistant, was there along with Matt Forger. They were there all the time. They saw everything, and they didn't really see Michael play anything on Thriller because there were specialists to do everything.
Sure.
yeah.
Like there's people say he played it on Billie Jean or something, but that
Yeah, that's what I've heard, but that's just.
That that kind of answers a question that was in the chat. Was how hands-on was Michael with synths and other music tech? I'm guessing from that, like, not very.
Not a lot.
hands-on means like how hands-on was Quincy in production. He did like a producer today is in front of the DAW, doing all this stuff, but Quincy was hands-on because he was in charge of everything that was going on, including the atmosphere and the musical choices and the final decision making and
Yeah.
making sure that the vocal was, there was the right interpretation of the lyric. That's what hands-on is. Just because you're like turning the wrench, to me, that's not the hands-on part that really matters. So Michael was hands-on, but it doesn't mean that he played the part or turned the knob. But he was there making it be what it is, and it wouldn't have been that in the end. And Michael was there for every part of Thriller. And I don't know how it was later. I went on to do things with Quincy, Color Purple and all these things that he did, films. And I didn't do anything after that with Michael because it broke up into camps. And Chris Carell did Synclavier work. And I was a film composer. I wasn't like going to be a programmer any longer. I was erupting because I was doing so much with the film scores with Synclavier that I was getting approached to do my own scores, so I wasn't like really going that route.
Yeah.
But Michael was deeply hands-on with everything, maybe too much later on.
Yeah. That could definitely be argued. Any more questions in the chat there?
Keith
Music
in
Zero-
Watford.
Oh yeah.
Keith in Watford asked, "What did you do with Supertramp?"
I love the way you said that. Super.
Supertramp.
Roll the R, like super.
Supertramp.
Killer.
Supertramp.
eh?
Yeah.
Well, I worked on Cannonball, that album, which was
Yeah.
like one of the later albums, I guess. And I brought the Synclavier in, and they wanted the main track, Cannonball, which was sort of this jam, to like be Synclavier based. So I just use the sequencer and I programmed the bass and other sounds, for that song. And it was at their house in Encino.
Okay.
And just had the Synclavier delivered and spent like a couple of nights. They like to work at night, so I like to sleep at night, but they like to work at night.
Can I just ask how much like creative freedom you have, like say working on Thriller or working with Supertramp? Are you just like asked to come up with parts, or are you told what to play, or how does that work?
Well, I don't want to give you like the lawyer answer, like it's gray area. So
Yeah.
I won't, I make a point to interject what I think can work musically, because I think I want to give the maximum that I have to the music, because I'm in it for the music.
Yeah.
And I'm not a program, like I suck at computers, and like I'm not a technical person. I'm a music person that happens to have killed myself to figure out the technical stuff on synthesizers because I liked how they would add to music. So I make a point of doing it, but I do it if it feels right to do it, and I time it. So they'll say, we need a bass or whatever. So I'll ask them, I'll let them drive it. Like, well, what are you looking for? What kind of a bass? Do you have an example, or what does it have to do musically? Now you're getting into my realm.
Yeah.
And then we could lead to like, well, can I suggest something? And like on that one, I think I used a sample. I have a friend, Kevin Brandon, that was Aretha Franklin's bass player, and he came over and did a couple of snaps on his, like whatever that is on bass, where you like pop the string,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the thumb.
Yeah.
Pop. So he did a couple of. I had like one note, one sample, but I think I used that because I said, "Hey guys, I think I could put some pop and bass on it. You want to hear that?" And so it kind of works like that, We might have already put something down, on a synth or whatever, and then you just get into it. And then if they like that, they give you more leeway or not. Like if I think they really know what they want, like I don't want to interfere with that because they know the music better. But I just think a lot of times when they bring a programmer in, they feel like lost a little bit back then.
Yeah, they do. So I've got a question for you, Anthony. So I mean, you're sitting there with your back to all those synths, and the history you have through the 70s, 80s, using all this stuff. I think in common with quite a few people, you will have had some sort of musical background, or have listened to music. And what was clear from your first CS80 expeditions, with 6 of them recreating Beethoven's Eighth, you had some idea of using synths to give you the sounds for the instruments you couldn't actually play yourself, but you could use synthesizers to do that. And now you moved on to work in films, and I know some of your soundtracks are amazing. I love Elysium Fields and Self-Medicated. I think they're astonishing soundtracks, but they're really really lovely soundtracks, but there's not a synth in sight. It's or rather it doesn't appear to be a synth in sight. And so does what you've been doing with synths and your history before synths and through that, does that inform what you're able to do? Because you've got such a large, you end up with such a large sonic library in your head. You kind of know where you want to go with stuff. How did that influence your scoring?
I don't think like synths came first for me. I mean, what came first for me was emotion. It was like, that's what matters to me, and meaning. Like, why am I breathing? Why? And to play an instrument, you have to breathe. Even when you're playing a keyboard. And if you're not even breathing literally, which you probably should be, the phrase is breathing. And so I think of it like, what am I trying to achieve in the music? And because I started out with orchestral music. I didn't start out with synth. Even though I was getting called in, they heard this electronic thing of Beethoven. When the composer would give me his score, I had to analyze it from my knowledge of classical scores, which I had been analyzing since I was a kid, growing up around the symphony and the orchestral instruments. And when I got a synthesizer, the way I learned to program was to model. I went around backstage and I'd have the oboe player playing to my little cassette tape player. Then I'd put it through the ARP speakers, so I was on the same playing field. I had the same speakers, and I could patch the cassette in here, and I would copy how to make an oboe. And then I realized, well, this is not happening. Then I have to play like an oboe, or like like
That's
what an oboe does, and how it
Yeah.
moves over time, and all this kind of thing. So to me, like the scores that I didn't use synthesizer, which are many, I probably wrote 50 film scores where I just conducted the orchestra. That's because the story, it didn't need those sounds. Like, and sometimes you're playing with picture, and sometimes you're playing against the story. Like the film Witness that Maurice Jarre did. That's an electronic score of an Amish movie where they can't even plug a light bulb in. Right?
Yeah.
You're playing against picture.
Yeah.
So you have to make these decisions not based on what shit you have, but what works to move people so that they want to see or hear what you did. And also it's a good way to have a career because you're making your decisions based on music and not like, rentals or something.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important, I think, to figure it out, like from the music on up, and the songwriting and Quincy's motto, best song wins. It's like, that's really how it should be. And I think that's how you get the longevity out of it, both musically and career wise. And, you know, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think one of the sort of blessings and or curses of the era we're now in is there is so much choice, and there's just so many instruments. You can use software to call up plugins, etc. But that kind of, you've still got to be able to play the things. You've got to be able to play an instrument, a sample or whatever, so it sounds like the thing. We've had these discussions often.
Oh,
in fact,
yeah.
we've talked a lot about, you know, polyphonic aftertouch. You know, started with the CS80, and it's becoming a really hot topic now in MPE because it gives you the ability to articulate the sound, so that you're actually able to articulate it and make it more organic, so that the flow from here through to what you're hearing is much shorter. It's more immediate. So I was just really interested in how that happened for you, because you know.
I mean, it translates back and forth. Okay, in fairness, like what you do with an orchestra translates totally into synthesizer, because that's how I got into synthesizer, was by translating my orchestral knowledge, because that was the music that existed before electronic music. So that's all I could listen to and care about. And all the good music was acoustic orchestral music. There wasn't good electronic music in the 70s or even in the 60s when I was still listening to music. I didn't have an option to listen to electronic music. So I brought that into electronic music. And then in what you're asking me, the electronic stuff, now can I make the acoustic instruments do some of that stuff? Like, no one's ever tried to do that before. Can I try to do that? And I do go back and forth all the time. But then after a while, it's just one big thing. And the important thing is kind of what you said. If you have all these options, make them as small as possible.
Yeah,
you know?
Limit your palette.
You'll have the most freedom there for music to come out of it. Because it's just like, you know, you start looking at all these synths, and then like you have no starting point and no end game. You just have like a lot of synths, and they all make a lot of sounds, but like, where's the music in it? It's better, you'd be better off with one oscillator, you know, and an ARP Odyssey in front of you, you know, being Herbie Hancock.
Not a bad thing to be.
No, indeed. So I'm conscious of the time. We've got a whole pile of questions there, Ben. Do you want to pick a few?
Do a lightning round if you want.
Yeah, let's quick fire.
Music 01 asks, what's your favourite pedal to use?
Woo! I love pedals. I mean, this one.
Oh, let's bring that up. Oh yeah, phase shifter. Yeah,
This particular one, because Tom.
Yeah, the Oberheim.
It's really great sounding, but I mean, man, I love pedals. So it's a lightning round, so I can't tell you anymore. But I love. I use pedals on everything. I have every kind of pedal, like pedal boards. These guys, all the Boss pedals. You know, board, like the auto. I love these guys. I love all the modern pedals. The digital got all these kind of pedals.
You weren't kidding.
Was that an MT32 or something? Then I saw
pedals. You know, like through the Fender Rhodes. Like I like this shallow water thing. Like I don't know. I'm just like pedals. To me are. And that's one of the things about the 100M is it had a phase shifter and a flanger. I use all the time on the synclavier. And I put one side through the phaser and one side just normal. And it was all of a sudden my synclavier sounded better than everybody. Because I had stereo with all this huge pedals. Okay, we're in lightning round.
And the System 100 behind it, backing everything up.
Yeah. Right, next one.
Peter James Stephen asks, have you written your autobiography yet? It would be a fantastic read.
I mean, that's very kind, but I mean, I feel like I'm still living it. I don't even know when I would do that, but I mean, maybe just by doing this, you know, it turns into something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's very kind of you. I just want to just interact. I love working with the way people are flowing today, though, with DAWs and bringing that into, because it hasn't ended. It's just
no, it hasn't. No.
I'm still.
Sorry, I've got a question for you. Based on what you were saying earlier about like it seems a bit like entrepreneurial mixed with a talented musician. Your entry into the business. It was like you were taking risks and taking gambles. That was when specific pieces of equipment would be impressive, like you said, like the Jaguar cars. You know, a synclavier would turn people's heads when you went into something. How, if you were starting your career again now, I'm sorry
Right.
about this, but how would you go about it now that you haven't got that? I'm not saying that you needed that, because your talent is obviously great, but it seemed as though you used the synclavier as a hammer to get into the situation and then let your talent take over.
Well, you need a hammer to get into any situation.
Yeah.
Like, how would you get into track and field? I mean, how do you get
Yeah.
into anything? So I
So-
think that if
What
you
would-
call it entrepreneurial, that's great. That's a great word for it. But it's just if you were to do it today, I'd do it the same way. Like, I'd find the people that are doing what I really want to be doing and just track them down and then show them what you can bring to them. Like, and you have to know what they need. So you have to do your homework. And if you show up at the door of somebody and you know what they need and they hear that they'll attach themselves to you, maybe not that day, because you could
Yeah.
be some nut, but you no, I'm serious though. This is like
Yeah,
extremely
yeah.
important. But they will eventually. But it's not the gear that's why, like, I didn't own the synclavier in the beginning.
Yeah.
I just learned how to use it so that the guy that had it, who had the wherewithal to afford it, needed me.
Yeah.
And then you just keep going, you know. But that's the story of anything, you know. Like, if you go back to like who am I trying to think of? Like, he's an English guy that wrote some pretty great books. Great Expectations.
Oh, Charles
Oh,
Dickens.
Dickens.
Yeah.
Read that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Next question.
Sorry. Right. Did you work with Frank Zappa at all when he was doing so much with the synclavier?
I wish. And he had his own thing going on up there. I did not. He worked with NED. Maybe Kevin went up there. He kind of did his own thing, and he used it in a way that I don't think anybody used it. Like,
Yeah.
it was psycho, man. To get it to play stuff. He was really out to get it to play something that no one could play, which was cool. I mean, it was like music, because first of all, he was writing music for acoustic instruments that was almost unplayable. You know, Vinnie Colaiuta and Ian Underwood were like reading these guys are amazing sight readers. It was like at the extreme level of what they could accomplish. And he just took it even farther out, and he could get it to play in like tunings that weren't traditional and that sort of thing. But I never got up there.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have like gotten more into his head. I'm sure I would have learned a lot. Didn't get up there though.
There's a couple of questions I think kind of should go together here. So Wagyu was asking, we love the classic gear, but also interested in what new gear is exciting you. And kind of throwing off of that, Jimmy Chonga is asking, are you getting into the new synclavier Regen? Have you had a chance to play with that? So yeah, what floats your boat these days, you know, in the modern world?
Well, the new synclavier Regen, the first entire bank of sounds are mine.
There you go.
I did all new sampling for
Wow.
Cameron and Craig. Craig Phillips is Cameron's partner.
Mhm.
Sid passed away, and Cameron Jones is the inventor of synclavier, and Regen is his baby, and along with Craig Phillips, equally, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Craig has a lot to do with the Regen, and Craig came out here and spent time with me during the summer, last summer, not this summer, the summer before,
Mhm.
and we did all kinds of new piano sampling. We sampled my Rhodes, my clavinet, my ARP 2600, all the waveforms. I convinced Cameron on the new synclavier to like put out digital waveforms that are like analog waveforms. He put a filter on it.
Nice.
Digital filter with it. It's a pretty cool filter, and it's like all kinds of filters. It's like a 6 dB per octave, 12 dB per octave, 18 dB per octave, 24 dB per octave, high pass, low pass, band reject. You can do a lot with it. It's a great new synth, so I really like Regen. And you know, a lot of things that come up. For me, like the new stuff that I like the most are pedals. Like I showed you guys that pedal board.
Mhm.
You know, like what is this? I'll tell you some of the companies I like if you guys want to hear that. But I like Erica Synths makes a cool one.
Yeah.
Red Panda makes some really crazy stuff, and Maris. I really like the sound, the musicality of those things. And then this company, Game Changer Audio, they make
Oh yes.
Yeah.
they make a reverb that's like a light reverb, so it's like analog, and it's a real spring. You know, that kind of stuff's cool. And all the Eurorack. I mean, there isn't anything in there that I don't like. I love the Eurorack for controlling synths, and just grab one and try something different, and to make Starb 2600 do things that it never. Ooh, pretty good sound in there.
Nice.
All right, next
There
question.
you go. What's next?
Next question. Would be great to hear more about Anthony's work on films like Cat People, War Games, Beverly Hills Cop.
Cool, that could be a whole other show right there, couldn't it?
Yeah,
Well, that-
yeah. It's supposed to be quick fire, so I don't know how you're going to deal with that.
Two of those are Giorgio. So I worked with Giorgio for 8 years, doing all of his like arranging. I'd take his song ideas and make the song. You know, like the synclavier and all my stuff. I was set up there. That's when I had multiple systems, and I could be working on. I was working on like Young Guns in the night, because I was at Giorgio's in the day, because Giorgio only liked to work from 2 to 5 or 2 to 6. And then I'd come in the morning and get the tracks ready, and then I would turn them into cues for the films. So like Beverly Hills Cop or whatever. So there'd be artists coming through, and I'm basically taking his song demos from cassette, turning them into, you know, finished production pop songs, and then taking those themes and using them to score his films. And then the other one was War Games. That was Arthur B. Rubinstein was the composer, John Badham. It was right after Blue Thunder, which was my first big film using FM synthesis. And War Games was, you know, all FM synthesis, built the tracks up, and then the orchestra played on top of them.
Mhm.
So that was a cool model.
Right.
But the orchestra hated it. The union wanted to kick me out. MGM wanted to, like, have me never work again because I was charging. The union made me charge for every track of strings. So I'd be getting paid like $10,000 a cue. You know, I was getting it from both ends. Like, I couldn't win.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a really rough period for people to try to, and then sampling was about to happen.
Yeah.
I was in the that's a whole that is a show of like the politics of what sampling did. Like, it's never really been told. Even synthesizers, like with the
Yeah.
union and the players and the animosity
Yeah.
and the blackballing.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Oh, there was a lot of that. A huge
Yeah.
amount.
We had over here in the UK, wasn't it, the musicians union would,
Oh,
would
yeah,
go on
yeah.
strike. You know, Top of the Pops.
They
Back
seem
in-
to
back in
kick. They seem to kick off more about synthesizers than they did about sampling.
Yeah.
Which you think sampling would be the bigger detriment to actual
Yeah.
live
Right. They
musicianship.
sorted out sampling because they realized that the copyright holders could like monetize it. So
Yeah.
they figured it out. But with the synths, it was like the musicians couldn't get involved in it, you know. So
Yeah.
we were just replacing massive amount. They needed to do something, you know. And I was involved with the secret meetings and showing up and getting hated, but we did come up with a scale that was at least reasonable for me to do all these multi-track film things.
Yeah.
So it kind of answers that question too, because we were dealing with that and we were replacing huge amounts of musicians and figuring out how to get paid for it. And, you know, it's a different sound. It's
Yeah.
not the same as, you know, writing for real strings is
Yeah, yeah,
hard.
yeah.
It's
It's
different.
different. Yeah. A question from Ben Simpson, just outside Liverpool, asks, "Who is the best to work with, Quincy or Giorgio?"
Well, all right. Well, I mean, Giorgio is going to give you the key to his Aspen house. So,
There
Yeah.
you
know
go.
what I mean? But Quincy is going to, with Quincy, because Giorgio didn't work with that many musicians. It'd be like you and his engineer, and you got to do everything.
Yeah,
Quincy, you're going to meet all the coolest people, and you never know who's going to come in. Like, you know, anybody could walk in the door. Like George Martin could walk in the door. Paul McCartney could walk in the door.
yeah.
You know, it's just kind of crazy. Or celebrities, you know, that Quincy knows everybody. Miles Davis could show up. That's not going to happen like with Giorgio, because Giorgio knows a lot of people, but his sessions are just like, it's just you and the engineer, and Giorgio will come in and out. And But Giorgio was so generous, like amazing. Like he likes to hang out with you,
Yeah.
and we'd go to parties. It was like you're really part of the Giorgio thing. We all worked together, and when you were working with Giorgio, you worked on everything he did, and he would have 5 things going on at once. And you know, again, work with both of them if you can.
Yeah, good
I would
answer.
love to.
Yeah.
I'll be giving him a call in a minute. I'll give him a quick call. Hang on. George, what? No, I'm busy, mate. I'm talking to Anthony. Yeah.
Not you again.
Oh. He never stops bothering me, that Giorgio. Honestly. Oh.
Right, we've got
Restraining
another
order.
question. We've got another question
Yeah.
from Synth Addict. Does Anthony see game scoring the same as film scoring, or were they very different experiences?
Okay, I'll be right back.
He's off.
Hey, the only video game I did one video game.
Hey.
I look like a redneck with this thing on.
Which one was it?
You know,
Yeah,
this is the game.
Far Cry 2024.
Yeah.
Mario Bros.
Okay, so here's what you're gonna love this. I'm working on this video game, and I hear all the video game scores, and I go, cool. It's like pop music, but they're loops, you know. And you pop out on the scene, and you get to do the music before, so you don't have to hit picture, and you can really write some cool stuff, right? And they really want unusual sounds and everything. So I do it. They send me to Shanghai. I meet. It was like a fun experience. Great eating in Shanghai, China. I met the inventors. You know, come back. I'm ready to do the tracks. I send the first stuff in, and they say, "We love it. We love it, but we just decided we don't want any backbeat or snare in anything that you do for this." It's like, are you kidding me? Like everything I've ever listened to in a video game has like backbeat in it. And they go, no,
Yeah.
we just decided like we want what you're doing that you sent your original tracks in for that are like, it's on Mars, right? It's like Lost on Mars. But we want it to be a spaghetti Western on Mars with synthesizer, and you can't have any backbeat. So it was my video game experience. It was like, but you know what? Now I can write music without backbeat that sounds good. You know, and I was really freaking out.
yeah.
But those challenges help us, don't they? They help us grow as composers, creators, don't they?
Absolutely. Better than just going in and being like, oh, I'm known for this, and like everybody loves you. Like feeling uncomfortable is part of growing, you know. That's what happens with kids and their knees and their, you know, growing pains, and you need it. And, you know, bring it on. Let's keep me in pain.
I think if you're always in your comfort zone, you're never going to discover anything new, are you? You know.
Well, it's David Bowie said that, didn't he? He said, you know, when you sort of walk out into the sea, and it's that moment you feel like you can't touch the ground anymore. That's where you're doing your best work, because you're on the precipice of something, and you're a little frightened, you're a little scared. And he said that's where you do your best work.
And that's where mistakes happen, because you don't know what you're doing, and then. Like if you discover that there's something new, it's a lot of times in the mistake. So it's not really a mistake, but like you put your foot in something, but it's something you've never done before. And then if you're able to recognize that and take it and look at it for a second, you might be able to turn that into something really fresh. I mean, that's what happens when you're in that sort of situation. I think for me, I turn those things into something, and you just have to be aware of looking at things a different way, because otherwise you just think I goofed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ian Cracknell, for your donation. Great show, fabulous guest. Take my money. Thank you. We happily will. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the show.
That's so nice.
And the last question that was in the pot,
yeah.
it's not so much a question, it's an invitation, Anthony. Can you ask Anthony to visit Scotland so I can buy him as much malt whiskey as he wants while I just listen?
Oh, that's so kind.
There you go.
Sure. I don't. You know what I do though? You'll love this. I don't drink. I never drink. I don't drink at all. But I like the taste, like of wine and whiskey and all that kind of stuff. So when I do, I just spit it out, and I have pretty good like taste buds. Like I know how to taste good wine and good whiskey and all that stuff. But I spit it all out. So if you could handle that.
Well,
There's
isn't
a
that what they do
whole
at
thing-
tasting? There's tasting sessions where you
Just
go
a
along
spit
and you
bucket.
Go,
Yeah, that's what you
and
mean.
then
Yeah,
And
I
then
just don't ever want to get buzzed at all from
Yeah.
it. So I
It's
just
wonderfully weird, that, and
no, it's not a bad thing. Andrew Brooks, thank you for your donation again. One of the best shows in ages. Thanks all You are more than welcome, but I think we all know who the star of the show is.
You guys have real.
Oh, don't worry
No,
about it, man.
it's Anthony. It's Anthony. It's Anthony, really. No, you know.
Gentlemen, I'm gonna have to draw it to a close. We're out of time. I've been sat here tonight thinking this right here is why we do this show. It's why we do what we do, because we get to talk to amazing people with amazing stories and amazing information and inspiration, and our audience have been lapping it up. If you watch this on catch up, and the chat replay will be there. It's just a stunning reception, and Anthony, I cannot thank you enough for giving us your precious time to come over here and share it with us.
Well, it's my pleasure, and what made this show? It's a 5-ring circus.
It's true.
Thanks all of you. You guys making it happen. Keeping it alive. That means a lot.
Well, thank you, and I mean, we're going to have to get you back. I'm sorry, but we are going to have to get, because there's so many things that I've got on my list that I didn't ask, and other people. Oh, very funny. What is that? A drum roll? Is that a horn? Or is that the crickets? What do you reckon?
You're not a dad by any chance, are you?
There we go.
Oh, you have one. I'll bring my front. I'll be happy to hang again.
Well, we are keeping in touch for sure, and not to the point of a restraining order being required, but we are going to keep in touch. Also, just want to say another thank you to Wagyu for another 10 chuffs or Swiss francs. Excellent guest. I hope Anthony comes back on a future show. I will do whatever I can to make that occur. Anthony, you've got some stuff coming out. You mentioned on your channels. I'm just going to throw the links up. If anybody wants the links, they are in the description already below us here. So do click on those. But it's Anthony Marinelli Music. Is your channel, and then of course all the thriller stories is Stories in the Room. So those are the two links. They're both in the description below. Go and sub to that channel and watch the videos. You will not be disappointed. There's regular content. As I said, we went up against one of Anthony's videos literally at 7 p.m. here in the UK. So go and watch that one, because that's a CS80 special. That whole Rob Rosen thing was really cool to watch as well.
Right.
So
on Instagram and TikTok too. You'll see the shorts, because sometimes if you only have a minute, you can burn a minute.
Go and sub to all of that stuff, because it's gold. It's absolute gold. Anthony, once again, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's just been an absolute pleasure and honor to meet you and to hear your stories. And we'll try and get you back soon. Just a quick whiz around the room. Ben, much on coming up this week?
I'm playing Bolton Food and Drink Festival tomorrow. And
good evening, Bolton Food and Drink Festival.
Yay! It's big time. After Anthony, you will reach these heights one day, mate.
Well, I'll be spitting.
And then I'm playing Martin Beer Festival on the Sunday.
There's a theme here. There's a theme.
There is.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good stuff. Good to have you back, Ben, as always. Kent, have you finished working on what you were working on? And
I'm getting a small cake tomorrow. I have met a landmark today. I restored, my 600th CS80 today.
Wow.
Jesus, I didn't think there was that many in existence.
There's 850.
Wow.
So I've nearly done them all now.
Wow. Did you go through? Did you get Fiona go through the accounts and just go count them all?
Oh, Fiona's going, new car. I said, no, as long as it's a Buick Riviera, I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
600
So
CS80.
600th 80.
Wow.
I'm tired now. I'm going to go sleep.
Yeah, don't blame you. Don't blame you, mate.
But you know
Andrew?
what was harder? I'll tell you what was
Go
harder.
on.
Sorry. What was harder was trying to get Noah into his wheelchair.
Oh,
we got
bless
him
him.
today.
You got one, did you?
Yeah, but he goes mostly backwards.
Oh no. Just
Put it on him, he ends up in the kitchen.
I was over at Kent's place a couple of days ago, and poor little Noah, the littlest of the 4 dogs that Kent has, is poor
freakish
back
one.
legs.
Yeah.
No, he's not. He's
Robbie's
the best.
favourite.
He's my favourite.
His favourite, yeah.
His back legs are really not working, so we were talking about getting some wheels on there. So that's cool. He is so cute, but he gets if he gets left on his own, he just doesn't like it because he can't follow you anymore. Because that's really sad. But
Yeah.
I had lots of fun on the GS1, which was very, very nice. And
I broke it again today, by the way.
Oh no! I'm glad I got in there when I did.
I put the transistor in back to front.
Oh shit!
No, it's all right. All it did was kill the transistor. But I've ordered another one now.
Okay.
I wasn't looking properly.
Dear. I did
Idiot.
actually get to see the infamous Kent Spong garage.
Yeah.
Or garage for our American friends.
Got ours. Yeah.
Oh my word! That was a sight. I mean, honestly, you're just tripping over Jupiter Falls, memory moogs,
Yeah.
all sorts of glorious
Emulator
things.
ones.
I didn't see that. Was that up? Was that in the garage? I missed that one. I didn't
No,
see that one this
the emulator one's in the shed here.
time. Oh, it's in the up.
The garage is all the you are gonna die here kind of stuff goes in there.
It's the graveyard. Yeah.
Like that, there was that grey meanie.
Oh yes, there was a grey meanie.
Grey meanie up there, yeah. Bless its little cottons. There's a
Yeah.
couple of dead 2600s in there actually.
Yeah.
I mean,
There was a
very,
lot of
very,
dead things.
very dead.
There was
One
a lot of
them
dead
was-
things, electrical and otherwise. I think.
Yeah,
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 absolutely.
yeah.
Anyway, Kent, brilliant to see you. Thanks ever so much for coming. And
Thank
of course,
you.
Andrew, resplendent in your new ProSynth Network t-shirt, which are back available now. Viper Graphics. If you come onto our Facebook page, all the links are there. But you can get these wonderful garments, t-shirts, polo shirts, hoodies, and apparently he's able to do t-shirts in different colours, and then maybe the logo in different colours as well. So that'll be interesting.
Oh, okay.
Really?
So yeah, that's what he said. So, but yeah, Viper Graphics are back doing our merch, so that's really good news. And thanks, Andy, for coming back and doing that. Brilliant. Right, okay, I'm going to wrap things up, gentlemen. Thank you as always, Anthony. Once again, an absolute joy to have you on the show. Thank you ever so much. To all of our viewers, whether you're watching live or whether you've been watching on catch up. Thank you for coming. We absolutely love having you come around to us and spend a couple of hours on a Friday evening or whenever it is that you might be watching. I hope you enjoyed this show. I know I certainly did. And please do like, subscribe, share, do all of that social media stuff. That would be fantastic and much
visit
appreciated.
Anthony's
Yes,
channel,
Quincy.
channel
And yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Quincy, I can't, mate. No, he's still here. Look, ring him in a few minutes. Honestly, mate. Oh. Is
that for his fitting?
Honestly,
Honestly, mate, that's good.
honestly, we just
Just won't leave you alone, will he?
No. Anyway, I won't be here next week, so I don't know who's going to be doing the show, but it'll be a fun one, I'm sure. But thanks ever so much for watching. Take the greatest of care. Have a fantastic weekend and a good week ahead. We'll see you this time, same place next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.